in a large region, some way to the west. There were many kingdoms, each with their own peculiar character and culture. One such kingdom was called Alni, known as the Garden Kingdom for its people's skill and sensitivity for horticulture. It was a place where you could see flowers nearly anywhere you looked. But one place where flowers could not be seen was the inside of a fine wooden wardrobe in one of the chambers of the palace, where King Seruan had hidden himself, mourning the loss of his wife, the Queen. The grief-stricken king shifted between silence, weeping, and knocking his head and hands against the walls of the wardrobe, in anger that his wife, so beautiful in body and spirit, had withered so suddenly, like one of the kingdom's prize roses, perishing due to some accident, neglect, or sudden poor weather. Truly, the Queen's sickness appeared so quickly and resisted all attempts of Alni's healers, with their sophisticated herbal concoctions and tinctures to ameliorate it. For the first 8 days of his self-imposed confinement, the courtiers tried to console him and coax him out to eat something. But, in his stubbornness, he refused. Both the king and the late queen were well loved by the people of the kingdom, and so, from the 9th day, the king's advisor granted permission for subjects to visit him, with the promise of a cutting from one of the royal flower cultivars for any Alnian who could soothe the king's grief and convince him to return to his throne and his duties. Over the following days, a number of people were shown to the chamber where the wardrobe stood, from children and other youths, including some who tried playful trickery to draw out the king, to respected elders. But while the king remained gracious to all visitors, even to the youths, his stormy mood continued to churn within him. Then, on the 13th day, a lady stepped into the chamber. She was covered from head to foot in a long black crepe veil, and carried herself with the same mournful feeling as the king. Rather than try to say anything, she wept and sobbed, mirroring the king's grief. Eventually, the king opened the wardrobe doors a crack and said, "Dear lady, why do you mourn?" In reply, she said that her name was Repiara, and that she, like the king, had recently lost her beloved husband. She began to speak of her husband and her feeling of loss, and so the king spoke of the queen, and they continued talking together until after the sun had set, and the king called for a servant to arrange a room for her to sleep in. The following morning, she came to the chamber with the wardrobe again. This time, the king was waiting, sitting on a chair, with a faraway look in his eyes. He invited Repiara to sit on a chair near his. After sitting, she pulled back her veil, revealing incomparable icy blue eyes, sleek black hair, and a face that, although not that of a young maiden, had a striking beauty that seemed, somehow, ageless. And that sight, on top of the sharing of emotion the previous day, struck the grief from the king's heart, and began to fill it with a very different feeling. Before long, he asked her to marry him, and she became the new queen of Alni. From his first marriage, King Seruan had an only daughter called Florine, a traditional name of the kingdom. True to her name, she had a delicate and feminine beauty. At the time of his second marriage, she was nearing her 16th birthday. Repiara also had a single daughter called Mina, about the same age. But, by contrast, she was ugly in both body and character, with spotty and pockmarked skin, a clumsy nose, mismatched eyes, and a body too thin and too thick in all the wrong places. Many in the palace and in the surrounding Alni city muttered how odd it was that a woman so beautiful and elegant as Repiara could have such a daughter. For Mina, The sight of her stepsister was an insult, and she would spend much of her time making Florine's life miserable and slandering her to the king. The king, enamoured with his new queen, was easily swayed. 2 years later, both princesses were now of the age to be married themselves, and so word was sent around the other kingdoms. Repiara insisted that her daughter, Mina, being older, more beautiful, and better natured than Florine, should have the first choice. And this condition, too, the king accepted without question. Sometime after, news of the pronouncement spread among the kingdoms. Some way northwest of Alni, near to the sea, was the kingdom of Laguna, which, true to its name, was built on and around a large vibrant lagoon. The royal family of the kingdom, especially along the male line, was blue-eyed, with black hair that, remarkably, had a blue sheen that would appear under certain qualities of light. A year or so before Hanier of Alni lost his wife, the king and queen of Laguna were lost at sea during an expedition, and so their only son, named Seruan, was crowned. The young King Seruan was a couple of years older than the princesses of Alni. He had heard of Florine's beauty and set off to present himself to the court of the Garden Kingdom. Word of King Seruan's coming had reached Alni, and when Queen Repiara heard of it, she called for the kingdom's finest milliners, dressmakers, and jewellers, and had them prepare an exquisite new outfit for Mina. But she strictly forbade them from making anything for Florine, who was forced to wear an old dress of her mother's that was in a slightly shabby condition. So when the day came when Seruan arrived, Florine, embarrassed by the dress, hid herself in a corner of the reception hall. With all the room's attention focused on her stepsister, she was quite invisible. But despite all her finery, the profound ugliness of Mina outmatched the beauty of her clothing, and, instinctively, King Seruan was forced to look away. When she saw this, poor Mina's eyes took on a black look, and her mood was only worsened when the young king asked, "Queen Repiara, I heard there were 2 princesses in Alni seeking a suitor. Might I be introduced to the other?" The queen was reluctant to show him Florine, but thought that her shabby gown would put off Seruan. But the princess, blushing with embarrassment, only made the effect of her beauty more potent on the young king. Standing before her, he gave her many elegant compliments. Hearing this, Repiara and Mina each seethed. But Seruan paid no notice to this, fixated as he was on Florine. They spoke together for 3 hours without stopping. In response, Mina and her mother reminded the king that he had agreed that Mina was to have the first choice of husband, and so Florine should be shut away in a tower for the rest of the King of Laguna's visit. When Florine and Seruan parted, and she returned to her chamber, she was met by some of the guards who insisted she come with them. Having a delicate and gentle nature, she made no effort to plead or resist. But as she heard the door of the tower room lock, she understood what was happening. And when the guards left, she wept.